Call the meeting to order for the Election Review Committee. And I'd like to call a roll of all the members that are in attendance. And Deborah?
Here.
Lori?
Here.
Sue?
Here.
Julie?
Here.
Kia?
Present.
Hi, Kia.
Hi.
Joel Ahrens is in a court hearing this morning, and when he's done with the court hearing, he said he will try and be here. And I want to let everybody know that there's packets outside the door that going to have our agenda for today. And this meeting, we're going to start out with having the public input at the beginning of the meeting, just so that we can make sure things go a little more smoothly. And is there a motion for approval of the agenda for today's meeting? We have one adjustment, and I ask Ashley for a motion to amend the agenda, deferring item number 3 to the next meeting. There just wasn't enough time this week to get that long meeting done. And do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? It carries.
Bruce,
Yes.
Roll call.
when you have somebody on a phone, you need to have a roll call vote for all motions.
All right.
Alphabetical.
Okay.
I don't.
Robert, could you?
No Robert's rules. We just went through this in alphabetical. Robert's rule says alphabetical. And the reason I know that, we just went through it at the county.
And I appreciate that. We have done that a couple of times with commission meetings as we've had people participating by phone. So I will Committee Member Ellefson.
Yes.
Go off your agenda. They're in alphabetical order there.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Committee Member Ahrens, absent. Ellefson. Hogshead.
Aye. Yes.
Pearson.
Aye.
Roust.
Aye.
And Warren.
Aye.
Very good.
Chair.
Aye.
Chair Danielson. That's what was throwing me out.
We're all learning here, so.
We are.
So the motion passes to accept, and at apparently 6 out of the 7. So we skip number 3, and we're going into the opportunity for public comment in the 4th. Is there anybody in the group that would like to discuss anything that we're going to be discussing? Not having any public Well, today we wanted the public comment would be anything that has to do with the process that we're going through. We'll be having agenda items coming up talking about the voting centers, et cetera, in the following points. But if you have a comment that you would like to make concerning our process of the board and things that you would like us to look into, we'd sure like to hear about any of it.
This doesn't preclude them from commenting when we have an issue?
No, they can comment if they would like.
And I would just say that one comment that we usually open with, or we mention during commission meetings under opportunity for public comment, is it's an opportunity to comment on anything that is not a listed agenda item. That if folks are here to comment specifically about vote centers, we would ask them to comment when that item is discussed. But the opportunity for public comment is if anybody is here and wants to share anything with you as a committee that is not specifically addressed on the agenda.
Thank you, Robert.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Election Review Committee, First of all, I want to say I'm very glad you're here.
Excuse
Very
me?
glad you're here.
Excuse me, just, what, could you
I'm Rebe-
identify yourself?
Yes,
And-
Rebecca Dunn.
Thank you, Rebecca.
And to preface my remarks, I'd like to say that I spent 4 terms in the state senate. And during that 8 years, there was never, not once, an occasion where there was any question by myself, my constituents, or any citizens of South Dakota regarding the balloting, the election process, ever. And I believe this was under Sue Rouse's leadership, and there was never any question. In March, I ran for the city council, and 2 of my neighbors called me and said, "Your name is not on the ballot. Your name is not on the ballot." I said, "What do you mean that my name's not on the ballot?" Well, I was running in the Central District, and so I went running over there, and I do have copies for the committee, if you'd like to show them to them. The yellow one is a copy of the ballot, and this is, if you notice, in this area where my name is not, but this is the way the ballot should look. Okay. Do you want to show that to the committee? When I received this call, I was not so concerned about, I was concerned about those 2 people, of course, and they were very concerned that they couldn't vote because they've been longtime friends of mine, worked on all of my Senate campaigns. But I was also concerned about what other ballots was my name not on, and could this have affected other people whose name may or may not have been on the ballots. After the election, or even on election day, I received random calls from people saying, "I thought I could vote for you, but your name wasn't on the ballot." After the election, people randomly came up to me, like at Hy-Vee, et cetera, and said, "I thought I could vote for you in the Central District." I called Mary Galensky, who is a person who knows about the balloting, who knows about elections, who knows about things. I said, "Is there any way we can track any of this?" And she said, "No, not now." My point is I am so glad you are assembling to find out what is wrong with the system, whether it's the machines or pilot error, whatever it is. We need to get underneath it so that it's like it was before, where the election process was pristine. The last thing a candidate or citizen should have to worry about is whether their name is on the ballot or whether they can vote for the person they want to in the election. I'm a strong advocate of transparency in government, particularly in the election process. We should be able to go back and find out what went wrong and remove any bad ballots. I think when the process appears flawed, the public expects the greatest possible efforts for the public to investigate, or for someone to investigate. And the fact that you are digging deep and finding out what's wrong, this is not an opportunity to place blame on anyone. That's not why I'm here. But I think when there's a question out there that there's something wrong with the system, we need to get underneath it and fix it. So I appreciate the work this committee is doing, and I would like very much to restore the citizens' confidence in the voting process, and I'd certainly like to restore my own confidence in the voting process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rebecca. Would anybody else care to comment on any issue? The next item on the agenda is the discussion of the state's attorney's position on timing of ballot processing and counting. We had a question in the whole process of when the absentee balloting could actually be compiled after they've been opened, and Kirsten Kappmeyers wrote the legal opinion on the absentee ballot counting, and wanted to open it to the floor to have anybody discuss this issue. And Julie, I know that you've been doing some of this in Pennington County.
Yeah. Who asked for the state's attorney opinion?
Well, I had asked last time if at some point we could have a clarification of this issue.
Okay,
And
and then
I
that
had
was
thought-
forwarded it.
I had thought potentially that Kirsten might appear, but instead he chose to send a memorandum.
Okay. Yes, to answer your question, Chair, we in Pennington County have always had close to, if not the largest number of absentee early votes, mostly because of the air base. When we, in comparison to percentage of voter registration. So even my predecessor, which was 30 years ago, started keeping absentee ballots in-house. We were the first county that did that because it just did not give the precinct people enough time to count them with the systems that we had at that time, which were the lever machines. So we've been doing that process in-house for 30-plus years. It's worked very well. Along that time frame, of course, as the process has advanced, we have gotten changes in law. And the changes in law have been that we can now process those per law over a 2-day period. And we start on Monday, looking at the signatures, comparing those, kicking them out, getting any contact with the voter that we can, if we can try and get something resolved. And then on Tuesday morning, we bring the same teams in, actually more people, to make sure that we have them opened, stamped, flattened, hopefully by at least 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then we start scanning. We bring a resolution team in per scanner, and we start scanning those, which is simply running them through the scanner. However, we do not hit a total button or print any precinct reports until after polls are closed, and that again is per law. And it's worked very well. If you have the ES&S's ERM, their election reporting management software, you can actually load those totals into a software program, which then goes to the election night reporting of the state in a separate column, if you will, so that you can keep absentee votes separate, you can keep election day votes separate, and you can keep your provisional separate if you want to. It's worked very well for us. We've worked with every Secretary of State to make sure that when we report that information, we put it in the correct time frame so that when the public looks at the Secretary of State's website for votes, they know whether we have reported absentees or whether it's just a partial. Because then as ballots come in the evening, on election evening after polls close, you add the election day ballots to it, and that's when you can physically close a precinct so that it reports across the bottom of the roll-up of the Secretary of State's election night reporting. And it's worked very well. If we could not do that, even when we could not extend it to 2 days, we could not get them done before polls close. And we vote 25 to 30% of our ballots early, which I think number-wise is very close to the number that is in Minnehaha County, even though they have a larger voter registration base. We're very close in the same actual numbers. We must have more snowbirds. We have a huge contingency of full-time RVers in Pennington County.
Just like here.
Yeah. I mean, there are businesses that just have full-time RVers and prepare everything for them. And the legislators have not addressed that issue with refusing to do that. There's a lot of different laws. But anyway, if we could not do that, your election counts would even be later than they are. Because absentee ballots, because they are folded, have more issue going through the scanner. They just do. They're slower. They have more stuff on them. They're usually not controlled with the type of marker to use. So that's why it's imperative that that we counted them early. In the numbers that we had, we just felt it was better to do that,
So on the first day, this would be Monday.
Monday.
You're going through and just verifying that the packets that you've got are correct envelopes from each of the voters?
Yes,
And
they-
it's all, and you're sorting them and making sure that they're in the right piles, so to speak, to start with?
We print our ballots different. We print them by precinct, and we don't file them alphabetical by precinct anymore because we have them marked by precinct. It's an absentee. We can give you numbers by precinct of absentees, but we file them by date. So that if we have a question on an absentee, we know what date we got it back, we know what date it went out. So we file them by date, which saved us a staff person by not bringing them in, which they come in all different areas and dates and precincts. And what they do on Monday is they simply verify that we can open that ballot the next day.
Can I?
And they check them off on the voter registration list.
While we're going through this, Darlene or Heather, would one of you be able to come up and answer some questions about this part of the process for us?
Heather with Minnehaha County.
After listening to what Julie's just gone through on that part of the process, how does Minnehaha County handle the receiving of the absentee ballots and setting them aside?
How do we, like we talked about last week?
Yeah, I just want to just compare the two.
Okay. Like I said, Heather Irwin with Minnehaha County Auditor. When we receive them by mail, how we store ours compared to, like, you guys do yours by date, we do ours alphabetically by precinct. So they are in alphabetical we have two different groups. We have the group that came in by mail, and then we have the group that we received that came into the office and voted in the office. So we store them in those two different groups.
Okay. Go ahead, Julie.
If I may. The reason you do that, how do you print your ballots? You don't print them or have them coded by precinct, you have them coded by style.
Yes. by
Yes.
style.
The reason they have to do that is, that is so that they can report votes by precinct. If they didn't alphabetize them by precinct, the way they print them is by style, which you can have one style that is used in like 5 different precincts. And you're supposed to be able to report them by precinct. If you have your jurisdiction separated by precincts. When you use vote centers, there's only one precinct, so that you don't have to have that extra step. If they didn't keep them separate, they would not be able to give precinct totals.
Okay. I'm catching on.
Can I comment
Go
on
ahead,
that too?
please.
The difference between ballots by precinct and ballots by style, one of the key differences is that if you do ballots by style, in this county, for a general election, there are 8 legislative districts, it's still
Correct.
8?
Yep.
And so there are 8 kinds of ballots. If you do it by precinct, you have however many precincts you have. So here it would be like 70 plus
yeah.
precincts.
Okay.
So one advantage of doing it by style is that there's less opportunity for giving people the wrong ballot, because all you're looking at 8 legislative districts, you know their legislative district, and you do it. Those are simply preferences. Different counties do it a different way. Each way is equally valid and equally legal
Yes.
to do. This whole discussion of how you sort the ballots before Election Day really is,
Moot.
it's kind of a moot point, because it doesn't matter. The key thing is we get to Election Day, we check off the ballots to make sure that we have every ballot accounted for. Both of these systems, which are very different leading up to that point, from that point on, it's the same thing.
Yes.
You make sure you've got every ballot accounted for, and you count every ballot.
For those of us that haven't been in on the fine details, I just wanted to have some clarification so we don't go off in a direction that doesn't apply
Right.
under the 2 different situations. So, thank you, Heather. Anybody have any additional comments on the?
Can I make
Yes.
one other? I think some people potentially might have a concern about the business of you can run them through a scanner, but you don't dare touch a total button. That's no different than what we have to do now, because polls across the state open and close at the same time, which means that East River counties close an hour before West River counties, so we always get an hour head start here. But what that means is for that first hour, you have to make sure when you're counting ballots, you don't press a totals button. And so it's basically the same concept as what is done here. It just would be earlier in the day if they chose to count the absentees earlier in the day. But it's a process that they are very familiar with and do in fact use.
I remember in the general, I was done up here on the resolution board about 3 o'clock, doing the military ballots, and wanted to, it was interesting to go through that process. Now you had that 4 hours that possibly the tabulators could have been started up anytime during that day, whatever was ready from all of the opening of the ballots, verifying everything on now we're talking Tuesday, the second day. We could have started, and now according to what Kirsten has given us in this document, we would have no problem starting the tabulators at any time.
Legally,
You can
would
do
have-
that.
So once the system was ready, they could be started.
as long as you have adequate staffing, and that's a call for your auditor to make.
Right.
Does he feel he's got adequate staff to deal with election day issues, supporting the precincts, and have enough staff to run the absentees through?
And you have to have a resolution team. We have a resolution team per scanner.
And they were already here, because
Yeah.
Bruce was one of the resolution board.
He just moved
Who
over.
had been there from like 10 in the morning on.
One point I'd also like to make is if you don't keep your absentees on site, which is, I would say, the smaller percentage in the state.
You mean
They-
send them to the precincts?
If you
Just-
send them to the precincts, then the precinct board that is there, that has already worked most of the day, and in a general, does not normally have the time during the day to verify that the signatures match, mark them in the book, open them up, and put them in the ballot box. Those then are counted with election day ballots, and they're not counted till the evening anyway. So it's just the mass numbers of absentees or early votes that drove us to keeping them in-house, because those people are tired, and we could bring in another board. Even when we had the old-fashioned paper ballots, we used to bring in boards to start counting them ahead of time. So it's just slowly evolved. But it depends upon the number that you get. And it's done different across the state.
Does anybody from the auditor's office want to comment about what we've just been discussing on concerns you have about opening and starting the tabulating process? Do you think you could staff it so that it could start sooner?
It's tough to get them to stay.
Bob Litz is going to work his way to the podium.
Good morning, folks. Bob Lutz from the Auditor's Office, and to echo Rebecca's comments, I too want to thank you for stepping up and investing your time into this process, and I'm confident that we're going to get some good answers out of this thing and some solutions to the things that have been plaguing elections in Minnehaha County here recently. In regards to the staffing of it, I think that for us to run some, we get a big team, and they're up here opening those absentee ballots the day of. You saw that, Bruce. It probably had, 70 or 80 people up here. I can't recall the number. They open them up, compare the signatures, sort them, get them ready to run through the machine. Taking them downstairs and putting them through the machine, that's another process, and it takes some training, staff training, and I'm not certain at this point that we would have that, considering the mayhem that happens on election day. when I was laid up in the hospital, I did get an email from Heather, and I don't know whether the answer came to you, but election day, we had 1,991 calls into our office from 7 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock when the polls closed. That's a lot of staff time being used up to do that. You know, I had asked Kirsten Kampmeyer earlier about this, and you know, he had written the opinion, but I think where Kirsten and I, we probably had a bit of a language problem, because I consider processing ballots what we do up here when we're opening them, and we are sorting them out and getting them ready to run through the thing. And then we start counting them. To me, counting them is when you're running through the machine. And I think Mr. Kampmeyer was afraid that I was going to count them and release the results. And that was the reason that I took his wording to be discouraging as to not to do that. You know, going ahead and running those absentees the day before, and convening that board up here and letting the parties know 10 days ahead of time like you're supposed to do. But as far as the staffing goes, if I know I can do that, I think we could probably train somebody to do that, and I'd like to do it. I'd like to do it ahead of time, and you know, do it on one of the smaller elections, make sure it works, and then go ahead with one of the bigger ones. So, counting the absentees, I think it would aid us greatly to go ahead and do that.
We have 2 elections before the next primary election. Both will be smaller elections than that you can test some ideas on. And we have the school board election coming up in Sioux Falls, and then we have the city school board election next year. And would that help you in that process to run some?
Well, you know, before I would want to speak on behalf of doing things for somebody else's election, because it has to be clear that the city has their own election and the school boards have their own election. They're in charge of that. And the way the county helps them is with the absentee voting. We do them for their we do the absentees for them down at the walk-in part and the mail-out. And then we also tabulate their ballots. The rest of the election is all on the school in that, and I don't think I could make a decision like that without conferring with those people. I would also tell you that due to the smaller, especially in the standalone school election, I'm not sure that we're going to find much out due to the small numbers. Maybe somebody would disagree with that, but you know, if we come to consensus, I'd probably be willing to try to do that.
Let's talk about the your election cycles in even years, the primary and the general. Do you hire any additional staff to work the early voting process?
Yes, we do. We have them in the office, and as it gets closer to the date and the frenzy picks up a little bit, we hire on more people, yes.
Okay.
And as to the exact numbers, I think Ms. Irwin, you know, I've left her in charge of that because she has a much closer feel to it. And then I'd also like to add that during this last election, since I was on the ballot, I stayed away from that end of the process.
Yeah.
Because I did not want to look like I was trying to get votes.
Yes, Judy.
In addition to that, who runs your scanners? The people?
That is our staff.
Your
The
staff.
auditor's office, we are trained on it. And I think, you know, by and large, it behooves the process in general. It's kind of a complex process. And to have the same people doing it over and over again, I think improves accuracy, it improves the efficiency of the whole process. And not that we couldn't bring some people in from the school or the city, you know, but they'd have to agree to that, and then we'd have to put them through some training, and you know, maybe one of the smaller elections would be something that we could do that on.
If I may. And you have 2 people per scanner?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, the correction there, Ms. Pearson, when we brought the 850s on, we had 3 people per, and one of them was the runner back and forth between the ballots. So we had a total of 6 people between the 2 machines working them.
And the runner ran the ballots that were the blank ballots back to the resolution team. Is that what you?
Well, we would take the ballots that the machine kicked out and put them at the resolution board, and then the other ones that had been run through the piles. When the ballots come into the room, we take them out of the ballot box. We separate the unvoted ballots with the voted ballots, and then the voted ballots go on a table. And as the machine runs through a certain precinct and they become low, then the runner person goes back and gets that pile of ballots for them to start on the
Okay.
new precinct.
And then takes the scanned ballots and puts them in a secure place for the,
We put
okay.
them on another table that keeps them separate from the ballots we've already run through.
I agree with you that your scanner teams need to be trained. Otherwise, you run into the problem that you're trying to train and run ballots through and get reports out for the media. What we have done is we have obtained from other county offices people that we have used on a constant basis that come over and scan for us. And then that way you can get them trained. They're already vetted. One's from the state's attorney's office and one's from the sheriff's office, so they're already vetted. We deputize them so that they can run those through. And then those teams start when they're done with the work. And so it works very well, and you have your trained staff. Because when we were running, we've combined with city and school, and our business manager, as well as our city finance officer, did not want their employees scanning ballots. So then we changed from those employees to ours. And yes, it works very well, and you do have to have them trained.
And consistency in that training and using the same people over and over again, I think would be the key to that. Up to this point, we've not done any processing of the ballots beforehand,
Right.
And so it's not been necessary. But yeah, I would like to do that, and I think there are people out there that would rise to the occasion, because it becomes a very long night, and those same people, if they're employed by the county, have to get up and go back to work the next
Work the
morning.
next day.
Ms. Julie.
Who runs your information, who runs your election reporting management system?
Darlene does that.
Darlene do that. And are you the one then, Darlene, that loads the information into the state election night reporting?
Darlene Johnson from the auditor's office. We have several people from our IT department that actually take the jump drives and upload them into ERM and send the information off. I stay in the office. I close the precincts as we've counted them, add the provisionals and close those precincts, and kind of monitoring from the office. But we do have IT people that actually do the uploads.
Yes. What I talked to, we had a meeting, the auditors across the state had a meeting with the new Secretary of State yesterday, and the election reporting management system is the software program that takes the scanner totals and puts them together. In the 850s, you cannot load them from one scanner to the other anymore, so you have to have this combining software. And it's that combining software that produces the combined totals if you set up different groups, absentee, election day, and provisional, and then you have to upload that information to the election night reporting system, which is managed by the state. But there's also a lot of manual entry to that I talked to them yesterday. But closing out a precinct, you have to put in the number of ballots that you counted. All that information is already in the election reporting system. But because this is a new voter registration onto the election night reporting system, they haven't got all those program changes made. And that was one request that I made, is that they need to be able to read the information that we upload, if that's a correct word, to the election night reporting system, so we don't have to load anything in. And that would save one entire person. Plus, it also speeds up the reporting time. If you're counting precincts on election night and you've got 5 precincts on a scanner and you store the information, you take it in, you put it in through ERM, which is not a difficult process, and you upload it, it takes about 10 minutes to get that loaded onto the election night reporting system, and then you have to go in and you have to do some you have to bring up each precinct, you have to report how many ballots you cast, which is already there, why you have to do that. And then you have to tell it, well, that you're done with it. Well, to me, you're done with it. You know, so they are, we did get affirmation from the Secretary of State that before 2016, they are going to have that a very smooth transition so that we don't have to do that, and those reports will get to election night reporting, which is where everybody gets their information from. So that will help. That was part of our issue too. They weren't flowing through correctly to election night reporting system, which was part of our problem of why we had reports in late. But we believe that that will be fixed by 2016.
So this is just another way to free up an individual in your staff and the rest of the auditor staffs.
Well, and to get the reports onto the election night reporting system, when you have errors, you still have to spot check. If you load it and it goes seamlessly, you're still going to spot check. And when we first started spot checking, of course, you do that after you've loaded 5 precincts. Well, then you have to go in and you have to clear election night reporting system at the state, and then you have to try and figure out where it's wrong from. Did it come over from ERM wrong? Did it go into this? It was the link and the uploading of the information into the state system. And of course, then when you have to zero that out and start over, that all takes time. And that's why, even though we were done counting our absentees earlier than we were putting in precinct totals, that's why some of our totals weren't available to the public, is because we had to start over at the ERM, which means you have to clear out ERM, which is the software that uploads into there, and then reload it, let the Secretary of State's office find out what the issue is. Then you have to bring in IT people, and yes, you have IT people, we have IT people. So that all took time. That also was part of the problem on the 2 bigger counties reporting on election night. I mean, our office was criticized because even though we were counting and we had absentee numbers, we could have definitely put them on election night reporting system, but we couldn't get the numbers on there correct. And we thought, again, we pull it back until we can report correctly. So that took, say, about an hour. So that was part of our issue. I don't know if you guys ran into that or we had it fixed by then.
We didn't have any issues specific to that.
Yeah, but we were loading totals before they were too.
This goes back to that 240 missing
No.
numbers, or?
It goes from the combining software, you take the scanners, you load the information onto thumb drives, you load it into your combining software, so it takes all your scanners and totals and put them together. And then we have to get it into the state election reporting system in their computer, I don't know the right words, Sue, into their computer base, and that's what scrolls on for all the voters, all the constituents, all the media to see. And we couldn't get the numbers over to their system correctly.
Okay.
We had upgraded to a different version of ERM. That could have been the issue. I don't know if does Sue where's Sue Krepke from? Davison, does she use ERM?
Yes.
Yes. And I don't know what version she was on, but all of that takes time. And you can test away and you're really not going to know it. I mean, our test went perfect. And that test deck always runs through just perfect. It's not till election night that those things kind of creep up. So, but that will also speed up, not counting, nothing else. It will speed up getting the totals onto the state system for the media to see.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions involving our topic that started out as the legal opinion on absentee ballot counting? Yes.
Just a quick comment. In speaking for the city, I would be happy to test that out in 2016, counting, running our absentee through if Bob's staff is willing to do that. So maybe we can give that a roll in 2016.
That would be excellent. We'll move on now to the discussion in number 6 with the challenges and opportunities utilizing voting centers in Minnehaha County. And in this situation, we have two different types of elections being handled in the Minnehaha County and especially in Sioux Falls. We have one concept is the super precinct voting center, and then the county of Minnehaha has for the general election and in the primary, we've been using the precinct type of voting, and I'd like to have somebody kind of lay out, I guess, more of a formal definition of the differences between it, and maybe, Lori, I could throw this on you, and we could talk about voting centers to start with.
You bet. Both myself and Bev Chase with the school district have experience with the vote centers, and both of our governing bodies have committed to using the vote centers for our elections. We started in, was 2012 our first election, Bev? Together. And 2011, that's right, 2011, the school district first used the vote centers, and then as a combined group, we did ours city school election in 2012 using vote centers. I came on board about 3 weeks prior, so just kind of jumped into the process and we got it done. 2014, and then of course in 2013, the school district again used vote centers. In 2014, for our combined election, we did use vote centers. We agreed on 13 vote centers that we would use, and Bev with the school district will have those same 13 for her election this year. We're looking at adding probably a couple more for our 2016 just because of some huge numbers that voted as where Sue worked at Faith Baptist in the South. So we're looking at adding probably a couple more, 2 to 3 more. What we like about the vote centers, and of course, speaking for what works for us, is our voters can go to any one of the vote centers to vote. And of course, we have the e-poll books. The e-poll books are critical. If you are using vote centers, you have to have the e-poll books.
Connected.
Yeah, connectivity is correct. And that worked. We did a survey afterwards of about 3,300 voters and had an overwhelming response that loved the use of the vote centers. Of course, there's confusion every time. We get calls, well, I wish I could just vote at my church down the street. There's times where they do have to go a little bit farther. We try to base the location of these vote centers throughout the city, strategically placed so that they're easy to access and get to. We actually did, also in 2013, we had a review done by the city's ADA consultants that are out of New York City, and they do ADA consulting actually across the world, and they went and viewed all of our locations, and there was one that we ended up changing out because it was not ADA compliant, and that was an easy fix. We found a brand new church that had been built, Gloria Day, and that was, I mean, that met the needs perfectly. So that's one advantage as well, is that we know that those vote centers are all ADA compliant, which is a huge issue when it comes to the Justice Department watching the vote centers and where people vote and so on. It's not perfect. We still have things to work out. Probably the biggest challenge that I would see with the vote centers is ballot allocation. It's hard to know how many, we might think First Lutheran Church downtown, we have, 20,000 people working downtown. Are they all going to vote downtown? How do you determine, we had 6 ballot types for our 2014, and in 16 we'll go back to the 9 ballot types, and we'll finally have a little bit of a history to go on so that we can look back and see our numbers. But it was surprising, locations even for 2014 where we thought, well, that's northeast, they're not going to vote down in the southwest part of Sioux Falls. Well, wrong, they did. And so that's the challenge. And we had the e-poll books from the state, and then we also had iPads so that we had runners that were assigned to different quadrants of the city to make sure we had enough ballots everywhere. And we were watching those numbers. They didn't work great that day. They worked initially in the morning, and then from then on we had to kind of do it manually because they weren't quite keeping up with it. But that's a huge challenge. The biggest challenge I see is the ballot allocation, but I'm hoping over time we'll be able to look at our history and take those numbers and say, well, for our, when we have our 9 ballot styles and we have our 4 council members, school board, charter items, we know that this is about what our turnout will be, and this is our history for what we've done. This last time was really a challenge because we had school board, mayor, 4 council members, charter amendments and 4 ballot questions, which was huge. Our ballot was really fun to get that all put together, but it was really tricky to determine. We thought we'd have a bigger turnout than we did, but the South just got swamped, and of course one of the major issues had to do with southern Sioux Falls, and that could have attributed to that, but that's just kind of an overall. Bev might have some things to add to it. She was involved in the vote centers before I came along, and may have additional comments.
Can I ask one question? Have you done a cost comparison of what it cost you to run a vote center election compared to the previous precinct-based
Well,
elections?
That's a good question. And it's kind of tough to do yet because as far as the number of election workers, we hire about 100 less to do vote centers approximately. This last time, our numbers were up there because we ordered at 115% for our ballots to make sure that we were not going to run out because we really thought we'd have a huge amount of voters. We also staffed our vote centers with 10 people per vote center. We added more throughout the day. I think it came up about even out this last time compared to, for instance, like our 2011 special election. But over time, as our as our data builds, we'll be able to see a little bit better the cost comparisons. I don't know that we're so much, as a city, that we promote the vote centers so much as cost savings as it is for the convenience of the voters.
Would you like to add anything at this point, Bev? Please.
Hello, I'm Bev Chase from the Sioux Falls Schools, and I have a few comments to make. And let me start by saying that voting is one of the most important privileges we have as an American. And I believe every vote that's legally cast should be counted. And every voter who has been registered to vote in that jurisdiction should get to cast a ballot. Those are the two premises I base everything I do with elections from. That being said, I've worked for the school district for 27 years, and I have been in elections since 1994. And the school district is always looking for ways to streamline its processes, and it doesn't matter if it's in the classroom or for elections. And so I've been looking for ways to streamline the election process since 1997. And we first tried super precincts. Super precincts we tried from 2007 to 2010, and that was where we combined 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 4, 2, 5, 2, 6 all together in one spot. They were all the same legislative district. It just eliminated those 6 little precincts that were within 10 blocks of each other to one place. Well, that didn't work so well for the voters. They were very, very confused. So we know that was a flop, so we just had to keep looking for a way to come up with something better and to streamline it. So I began researching vote centers and e-poll books, and I was so impressed that voters could choose where they wanted to vote, and they didn't have to go to where the map said they had, previously had to go. They could go to vote at a place closer to home or closer to work or just when they were out getting groceries. And the use of the e-poll books in the rural counties in Colorado, in Texas, those people didn't have to drive 40 miles that way to go vote, which was a regular voting place, but they could drive 12 miles the other way and vote in town. And to me, that huge convenience for the rural voters. And I realize some of our counties here in South Dakota have voting precincts that are 40 miles apart from each other. So my dream then and now is still to be able to allow voters to vote where they are and not where some map dictates for them. The use of e-poll books and vote centers has been around a long time. And Larimer County, Colorado, Tippecanoe, Indiana, Dallas, Cass County, North Dakota, Galveston, Texas, Baltimore, Maryland. There are just a few places that have used vote centers and e-poll books for years and years and years. And even this past year, poll books were used in St. Paul, Minnesota, St. Charles, Missouri, and Biloxi, Mississippi. So it's just keeps continuing to grow. And they had great success with the e-poll books and vote centers. And my hope is that Minnehaha County, Sioux Falls, and the school district can be added to that list of places trying to make voting more convenient for our voters. To that end, in 2010, the school district, with the support of the Minnehaha County Auditor, asked Senator Gant to sponsor a bill that would allow the use of vote centers and e-poll books for the school district's 2011 election. The legislation was passed, and with the support of the Secretary of State and the Minnehaha and Lincoln County auditors, the school district used vote centers and e-poll books in South Dakota for the first time. We surveyed our voters that day. We had 2,800 people respond to our survey, which in an election where there were only about 4,000 voters, 2,800 respondents was a great turnout. The responses were mostly positive or neutral, and only 8% of the voters total gave us a negative response of any kind. The written comments were overwhelmingly positive. Voters liked being able to choose the location to cast their ballot. They wrote comments like closer to work and more convenient, and I really appreciate the opportunity to choose where I vote. I do believe this option will increase voter turnout in future elections. I also had a lot of anecdotal stories told to me that, oh, I got to take my mom to vote, and I could vote there too. That was great. I didn't have to go home to vote. But the responses weren't all rosy. We had a lot of older voters that did not like the change and were very skeptical of the computers. Some were afraid that by using the computers, they would get more junk mail, and that their personal information would be on display for everybody to see. But the e-poll books only display what the election official needs: the name, the address, the year of birth, and whether they're inactive or active. That's all what the poll workers can see. And some older voters thought that they were casting their ballot on a computer because we were using computers. But we told them no, the e-poll books were just a tool for the election workers, and you still get a piece of paper and fill in that oval. In 2013, as Lori said, we made an effort to standardize those vote centers so that we would have 13 places that the voters would always know that any election they could come there and vote. And with that in mind, the city clerk, the county auditor, and one city commissioner and myself traveled around town, and we looked for ADA accessible buildings that could host vote centers. When choosing a voting location, we have to look at ease of finding the facility and large parking lots and a place close to the door that the voters don't have to go in this building and wander around, but the vote center is right there inside the door for them, and that would be able to host us. So with that, the city and the schools came together and we said, okay, these are going to be our 13 sites. Sometimes we have to change a site, but you know, that's going to happen in a regular election anyway. So basically, schools and city do the vote centers at the same 13 at the same locations, and the county chose not to do that. So in my opinion, the two biggest advantages to vote centers and e-poll books is, number one, you never tell a voter you have to go to this place to vote, because we got them in the door, get them voted. Number two, the e-poll book makes it nearly impossible to cast a double vote. You can't go vote absentee and then go to your precinct and cast the vote, because the e-poll book has, in the programming, it says that the voter had received an absentee ballot. If they received an absentee ballot and they show up to vote, we're going to call the county and say, did they cast that absentee ballot? So it's pretty hard not to catch them. Now, if they get sneaky and decide, well, I'm going to vote over here at IPC and then run over to Asbury United and vote there too, well, the screen comes up with a big word, done. Voter is done. And then you can click on a tab and it will show that voter's signature. So the voter, you can say to the voter, is that your signature? See, you already voted. So those are two of the biggest things that I think that it does. The other advantage to Vote Center is, of course, the school district has realized some savings in the costs. And we look for ways to eliminate costs that are not directly impacting classroom instruction. We know we have to hold elections and we budget for that, but if we can save costs there that we don't have to budget and go with the classroom, we do that. For the last election that we used precincts, that was 2010. We hired over 260 people to vote, to work that voting day. And we paid rent to the churches and the non-governmental entities that we used for voting locations. And that's a pretty easy savings to calculate, because this year I'm going to hire less than 100 people to work the vote centers. And I don't have to pay rent except to the 5 churches that I'm using. So that's a significant savings for us. And we pay our vote center workers, we pay them between $115 and $130. So if I have 9 workers, 8 of them are gonna get $115 and that superintendent is gonna get $130. So that's a huge savings for us. I know that e-poll books are not free and there's a cost to the system, but the e-poll books could be used at most 4 times a year, and so they should last at least 10 years, if not longer. And the beauty of the software that we used on the last election, they tell us if we don't want to move to the next generation software, we don't have to. If we're happy with the generation of software that we're using, we don't have to upgrade if we don't want to. So I could go on and on and on about e-poll books and vote centers, being the election geek that I am, but I won't. So I will stand by for questions, and I thank you for your attention.
We'll be having, on February 20th, we'll be discussing this a little bit, but we're going to be discussing the e-poll books in more detail and the data collection and how it's processed. And we'll be having some representatives from the states, the Secretary of State's office and the programmers. And we'll be going into this in a lot of detail that day.
Okay.
Thank you. Anybody have a
Question, Bev? You said St. Paul was among others who was using the e-poll books. Were they also using vote centers?
And for their 2014 general election, they did that.
Wow.
They
Because St. Paul is considerably bigger
considerably,
than
and they
us.
did it with 50 e-poll books.
My gosh.
50?
For 50 vote centers?
50 e-poll books, they said. I read that this morning.
Oh my gosh.
It was a pilot for them.
Wow.
Could you
But
share that?
I'm so amazed. You know, Sue and I piloted the auto marks for the state. We brought in the auto marks during a school election, and we ran those for the first time for the state. We did e-poll books for the state, and all these different jurisdictions have come and watched our elections. We had Minnesota come in when we did the auto
2006,
marks.
yeah.
And last year, we actually, was it last year? We were doing the primary and we were using e-poll books at a few locations. And I had a contingency from Great Britain show up at our polling place and wanted to see how they worked and talk to us about our processes, and they were so impressed by us. And we've had lots of entities come into Sioux Falls when we do these types of things. And to know that we are a leader in South Dakota for elections makes me very proud.
Go
I have
ahead.
some questions, Beth. What was your turnout in your last election?
It was 4 point something.
4 point something
But the
percent?
year before that, it was the last year that we had a standalone before that, it was 3.55. So it increased. Not a lot, but it did go up.
Say 4%, you're
Yeah.
saying.
And that's
And it didn't-
typical, that's
and it-
typical for a standalone for the
For a
Sioux Falls.
standalone, which is when you use the e-poll books in the vote centers. About how many voters was that?
About 8,000, 9,000.
Okay. how many different ballot styles did you have?
We only have one.
Only one. What percent of ballot stock did you order?
I order 40%
40%.
to make sure everybody's got enough.
Okay. And if I may, when you had your election, you said you ordered 115% ballot stock?
115%
How many
for-
ballot styles did you have?
We had 6 this last time.
And what's your voter turnout?
We had about 33%.
33.
For
Is
last
that
time.
fairly,
Well, that was kind of low for, it was a mayoral election with many questions. We really thought it would be higher. It's typically the mayoral's a little bit higher.
and what, I guess maybe more important, what were you expecting the turnout to be?
I was expecting it to be about 40%.
About 40. This is a point I want to bring up on vote centers. Do you want me to talk about it now, or? when
I'd
we
like to
discuss-
get into the next part of the discussion about what the precinct system is.
Okay.
And then I want to be able to have an open discussion, bring everybody in on how it differentiates.
Okay.
Thank you, Bev. Would Sue or Julie care to talk about the process here?
You wanna-
Since you
or
kind of
Bob,
devised
either
the
one,
system
Bob?
here, or would,
Maybe
Bob, would you like to come up and dis-
I think Bob, the way he has his set up.
yeah, could you come up and discuss how Minnehaha County and operates the election for precincts?
Bob Blitz for the Auditor's Office again. You know, I did want to just comment on the vote centers a little bit, because when I got here, I was new. Deb Owens was still the city clerk. Lori came in later, and Bev was a resource for me that I collaborated with a lot. And we looked at possibly having the vote center concept with the e-poll book for the county. And I like the e-poll book. I wasn't that wild about the vote center concept, but I did like the e-poll book, and I brought that up here. But to say it didn't go over very well would be an understatement. And so here we are at the precincts, because I knew there were going to be confused voters, and somebody had to pay the price for that. But the precinct system that we have here, largely it was in effect when I got here with Sue. And I also got here in 2010, and the legislative district also had done their decennial population study, and had cut up the legislative districts, and then did a little bit of rearranging there. And I don't think that didn't make a huge difference on the precincts. As a matter of fact, I'm not certain it made much at all. Sue, am I correct on that? I think the political lines lined up pretty good, so that the precincts stayed pretty much the same. And so the first one that you have, of course, is the primary, and which has a lower turnout. And the thing with the primary is that it's always in June, and in South Dakota we know the roads get tore up and construction happens in the summertime, and that's true with the school district. When it's in summertime, the school district has to get their work done, and a lot of the places that we do hold elections that happen to be in schools. And so you know, if I can't have it at a school place, I have to find a location, or else combine it with another nearby location that's familiar to people, and that sometimes works out. So typically, well, like in the last election, I think I had 68 locations for the primary, and that seemed to go pretty good. For the general election, we picked 71 out. Also, since I've been here, it was like Lori pointed out that ADA issues in some places have become quite a thing, and ever since I've been here, I've tried to integrate a couple of new locations that had better ADA places than the old ones, you know, just to make the future work better for people. And geez, here I am with a pair of crutches, you know, wanting to get into a voting place a little bit better. So, so I have the 71 of them, and the first part of the process, of course, is at the beginning of the year. I think sometime well ahead of the primary, and I can't remember the date. I think it's in March. I start calling around and I line my places up, and I also try to secure them for the general election. But like I said, sometimes the primary election and the general election, there's a little bit of divergence on that, but we work that out. And then right after that, what I start doing is looking at lists of people. And I have to, for the primary election, a lot of times 3 people work. For the general election, I have to have 5 people. And in some places, I have 6 people. Like out at Memorial, that place gets slammed pretty good. And so I'll have 2 precincts located in the same gymnasium, which causes another set of problems. And then I'll give one person kind of a book so they can go out to people in the line and tell them, okay, you're in this precinct, you're in this precinct. And Brandon, before we cut it up, was like that big time, where we had 3 precincts all in one building and people would get in the wrong line and stand there, and then they had to go get in another one. So I would send somebody out there with a book that told those people which precinct, which line to go stand into. And that's basically how it works, is securing the place and staffing it and looking out for any things that might happen during that place, like any remodeling that we'd have to do if we have to move it to a room. And those are the basic considerations. Are there any other questions that I could maybe add to that somebody could think of?
Go ahead.
What's your turnout in a primary and a general? About?
Well, this last time, our general was a little bit over 50%, and I think the primary was at 12 or 13. Now, you're
That's close enough.
You're asking me to recall off my memory, which
Yeah.
after my recent hospital stay, I'm not trusting that too well.
I'm not
Very
thinking
good.
clearly either. What percent of ballot stock do you order on a precinct basis?
For the primary, no, it's kind of interesting because Sue left behind quite a bit of data. And one of them that's really interesting is Ashbury United down on Western Avenue, because I looked, and one time during the primary, they had 53% turnout. So I'm sure Sue had to go steal some ballots someplace and run them back down there. And then the next time they had an 18%. So what I did to make sure that I didn't run out of ballots was I ordered 50% for the primary, which was probably too much, but I didn't want to take a scathing for running out of ballots. And then for the general election, I ordered 100%.
Okay, thank you. How many splits do you have?
Pardon me?
How many splits or different styles did you have in the?
The primary, I had 19 different styles. Is that what you're talking about, ballot styles?
How many in the general?
I had 8 of them. It was either 8 or 9. I can't read. It was 8 of them. The legislative districts.
Thanks. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any more comments in this area before we start open discussion? We've asked to have the auditor from Lincoln County. Are you the auditor? Yes, I am. Would like to have you come up, because we have some questions too, and like to get your feedback on how Lincoln County handles it, since Sioux Falls straddles the county line. And if Sioux Falls decides to do something, how that affects Lincoln County and your processes down there, when we have people that would think they'd be, let's say we did a voting center here in Sioux Falls for the general or the primary, if that was open to consideration. How would that affect what happens in Lincoln County on the, across 57th Street?
I'm Marlene Sweeter, and I am currently the auditor at Lincoln County. I'm relatively new to the position. I became auditor on May 1st. I went through 2 elections, but I'm not new to the office, and my predecessor put a lot of good things into place that I feel they went okay. We do use precincts in Lincoln County. We are rather unique in that we have southern Sioux Falls, which is by far our largest counting for the voters of Lincoln County. But we're rather spread out, and the idea of vote centers is rather scary to me, because we still need to have the majority of them here in Sioux Falls, but I still need to account for the people in the southern edge of the county, which doesn't carry the number of voters, but the distance between them is by far greater than those that are here within the city limits of Sioux Falls. We did have some part of the problem that we ran into when the school and the city used Faith Baptist, which is one of our voting precincts, is it created a huge amount of confusion for our people, because we would constantly get calls from people from our precinct workers at Faith Baptist, who would say, why isn't this person on your list, in your precinct book, in your registration book? And it would turn out they're from Minnehaha County, but they always came to Faith Baptist to vote. And so then they would have to be directed to their Minnehaha County precinct. That continues to be a large amount of calls on election day for us because of that use as a vote center during the city and school elections.
Go ahead.
And Marlene, for your elections, you have several voting locations in Sioux Falls, correct?
Yes, we do. We just increased it to 6 in 2014. We increased it to 6 voting locations.
So not only Minnehaha County voters in the wrong county, but you, I suspect, have a lot of Lincoln County voters who come back to Faith Baptist thinking this is where I was last time, when they should have been at one of the other 5.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so, okay.
there were just a lot of people who must have used that Faith Baptist during the vote centers.
I can tell you that.
So it did create considerable confusion.
When you go from vote centers
To precincts.
to precincts and back and forth for the voter.
Yeah.
Yep.
We were talking earlier about, we might as well ask you, in this situation, the ballot stock questions that were asked of Bob, and you know, how do you do it in Lincoln County normally? I'm learning about ballot stock issues, so.
You know, being new to the process, I did order, the 100%. For the general election, I ordered about 60% for the primary election. Our primary election turnout was very low. I think we probably had 8% or something like that. We had a very low turnout. Our general election, we had about 54 to 57% turnout, so we had a much larger one. But I did order the 100% for the general election.
How much for the primary?
I did about 60%.
60%. How many styles in each?
I can't remember, to tell you the truth. June is kind of a blur to me.
Yeah.
But in the general, we had 7 different styles. And 7 different styles would be probably, we don't run with commissioners at large. Had we had a commissioner race, we had 3 uncontested commissioners this year, but had we had a commissioner race, those styles would have changed, because
Your commissioners run by,
they run by district.
Okay.
We have 5 districts.
how about Sioux Falls School? Is that by district or at large?
It's at large.
Yeah.
So that would add to our mix, if we had those people, those races out there.
Do you have water district splits?
We do.
You do? Okay.
But in all honesty, I don't know that we've ever contended with them.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody have any other questions?
How many wards in the city?
There's council districts.
Council
Yeah,
districts?
Council districts, yeah, we have 5.
Okay.
5 council members run by district and 3 at large. We have a
Okay.
total of 8.
We'll be asking you some more questions in the open discussion. I guess I'd like to start things off, as long as you're standing here. We'll just start with the open discussion then. We have one of my questions is, I was approached by somebody I know that's from down in the Norway Center area. And this is a little rural community area down in southern Lincoln County. And they said, oh, great, if Sioux Falls would be able to do voting centers, Lincoln County I'd be able to vote anywhere in Sioux Falls. And I'm trying to explain to them that you cross county line, you can't do that. And could you address the confusion that you'd run into down in Lincoln County with having so many people coming in from out county into Sioux Falls that work every day, and add that to your concerns?
Well, that would definitely be my biggest concern because, you know, I have probably Hudson and some of my smaller counties down there that probably only have 100 voters. Well, if 50% of them work in Sioux Falls and choose to stop in southern Sioux Falls to vote, I don't feel like I can close. I think I would have to put a lot of thought into how I would handle the southern part of the county because I have so many small precincts down there, yet I have the distance concern. I probably have a lot of the older generation who probably doesn't work in Sioux Falls, and yet I have a great deal of those communities that have the working people who come to Sioux Falls and would rather run on their noon hour to southern Sioux Falls and vote than do it before they might leave town before 7 o'clock because that's quite a distance to go. I would find that probably my biggest challenge as to how I would handle those south of Highway 18 per se, because that's kind of where we things are different. So I would find that a huge challenge.
How far away is where you store your ballot stock to your farthest precinct?
I believe Hudson is probably about 22 miles.
22 miles. Mm-hmm. So this is the issue with going from a condensed area, which the city and school districts are, to a county that, I don't know how far are you in the center, is Sioux Falls, your office in the center of Minnehaha County? Rapid City.
No, north to south.
We're in the center of the
He's
bottom.
right here.
Okay, and how far,
Bob, could you put up the,
how far away is your farthest precinct from your office?
If I remember right, I thought it was 32 miles.
32 miles. Here's the problem. I don't think anybody will debate that you will save precinct workers when you go to vote centers. In Pennington County, we're 110 miles from one precinct one way, and 90 miles the other way from a precinct. And those are very rural precincts. Pennington tried once to close those far-reaching precincts and bring them into a more central issue, and were lambasted. The people that live in our rural areas are ranchers and farmers that, well, excuse me, not very many farmers, they're ranchers, and literally there are areas in Pennington County that don't have internet access, and some that don't really have cell phone service, and we vote still in people's homes. But they're very small precincts. And the reason and we have between 25 and 45 different ballot styles, because we have water district splits, we have school district splits, we have commissioners by district, everything is districted in Pennington County. And we have races in all of those. So we deal with a lot more ballot styles. And the reason I was concerned with the number of ballot styles, how far you are to drive to a precinct, and what normally your turnout is versus voter turnout is versus ballot production, that's where you're going to lose your money. Definitely, you will have fewer poll workers. Definitely. That is not debatable. Less rent. But however, to order ballot stock for this kind of an election for my county, I don't even know how you'd estimate it. Because, number one, I don't trust the media. I don't trust my parties. I don't trust my county commissioners. You can't even trust a candidate that won't pick a bus up, haul 300 people to Rochford, South Dakota, where it normally has 99 voters, 99% turnout, and you do not have enough ballot stock. And you cannot plan for that, because the way the law is written in South Dakota, and it was purposely written that way, is I can't have an area, like I couldn't say Rapid City gets to be a vote center. So anywhere in the municipal Rapid City, I could have vote centers, and anywhere you could go. You could vote anywhere. And preclude that same thing up in Rochford and Deerfield, South Dakota. The amount of ballot stock that you would have to order would be untold. And that, other than your precinct workers, is your largest expense of an election. Precinct workers and your ballot stock. And you can see the difference in ballot stock order when you order 115% and you're only voting 40. And that's pretty expected, because you have to have ballot stock to move. And if you can't get ballot stock there, you're extending the polling location time. And that affects the entire state. What happened in November, and guarantee it, unless you order 100% of every ballot style for every precinct, you could actually have that issue. And if you don't have enough ballot stock, then you're voting on paper. And then you have to bring them in, and again, it's 90 miles one way, 110 the other way. You don't get those ballots until about 10 o'clock at night. You cannot even get them started to count. They're small numbers, but you don't get them because of travel time. So now you've extended the polls. Now you're voting on paper. Now you bring those paper ballots in, and you have to recreate them onto ballot stock that, excuse me, you don't have, because you've already moved it all out. So for a county, in the perspective of Pennington County is long this way, it would be irresponsible of me, until you did several, to have some type of protection about how much ballot stock you're going to have. I haven't been able to figure it out. And until, if you have schools continue to do vote centers, and I can see why. It's cheaper, the taxpayers like it, or the voters like it. I can't say all of my voters would like it, because they don't like it if you can vote, if they can't vote across the street. And that could just be a difference between East and West River. We move a polling place, they hate it if they cannot walk across the street, or they have to drive 3 blocks. I'm sorry, that's just the way they are. So I don't know if they would like it as much as your people in Eastern River. We know there's a difference in voters. And those are my stop blocks in going to vote centers for our big elections. Thank God the city and the school combine with me, and I'm not going to vote centers, and they don't have a choice. So I'm lucky in that aspect that I don't have that fight. I would support e-poll books overwhelmingly to be used. Mine don't interconnect, but because I'm not a vote center, I don't need them to. It saves everybody time. It saves time of the precinct workers. It saves time of the auditor's office. It saves time of your voter. Because all they have to do is type your name in. It spits out where you're supposed to vote. If you're at the wrong place, you hand them that piece of paper and they're off. So that does work very well. But you can have e-poll books not connected together and not do vote centers. You will not do away with voter confusion until you vote everybody the same way. Now, my policy is when I change a polling location, every voter in that polling location gets a card. They get a new voter acknowledgement card. Do they look at them? No, they don't. But at least I can say I mailed you one. But you would be mailing your entire voter population every year, and that's way too expensive to do. So I don't know how you get away from the mixture of governments doing it different in the same district boundaries.
Julie, do you have, I thought I wanted to latch on to one thing you said I think is important. Out there, do you have city and school board elections on the same dates as the primary and general elections for?
Yes.
Okay.
We combine and we do most of the cities and most of the school boards. The biggest ones that are split, of course, are Rapid City and Rapid City School District, and we do theirs.
So that explains why you have more ballot styles.
Oh,
then.
definitely.
But you're able, obviously, to successfully make that high number of ballot styles work, though. I mean, it
But
goes without saying, right?
It,
or not?
yes, but I always, and Sue can contest, we always had the discussion of how many ballot styles, how many ballot stock are you going to order? Our test stack, I don't know what size yours was, our test stack, because of our splits and the way we have to have it, our test stack is over 2,000 ballots. It's this high. It'll fill a ballot box. And I have always ordered over at least 100% ballot stock, because in some of our generals, we've had 80% turnout. You have to be prepared, and a lot of my rural precincts will vote almost 100%. So you have to have.
It goes without saying then that obviously you have higher turnout then for those city and school board elections as
Yes.
well, right? Do they generally mirror what you see for those up ballot races, or is there like a big disparity between, you know,
Undervotes?
the up ballot races, you know, Senate, governor, et cetera, versus the down ballot
Oh,
races?
the fall off?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have fall off no matter who you have on the ballot. And even in a general, when we don't have city and school, the fallout definitely for the issues and the judges.
So is the city and school held on the first Tuesday in June then?
Yes, and then we have the runoff three weeks later.
And this is a question I would pose to the city and school board here, I guess, is have you thought about holding elections during the first Tuesday in June primary? I mean, I see a couple of distinct advantages. Number one, increase in turnout. You know, part of the democratic experience, more people get involved and vote, but also you'd be able to take advantage of those economies of scale created by the state or the county is already having to pay for personnel to be in those locations at those times.
We split our costs on a it's a
You prorate it.
Yeah, we prorate it by number of votes to total and all of that. And because we always have such a higher turnout, it actually costs the city and the schools more money to run in June. But you order more ballot stock because you have a higher turnout and you get more votes. And that's a political thing. There's advantages to different candidates whether you vote, whether you're going to win on a lower turnout than a higher. And that's the discussion. But yes, thankfully, we can do that in Rapid City.
We have representatives of the four entities in the room here, and I'd kind of like to hear what your thoughts are, Bev, Marlene, your thoughts, and Lori's. I mean, the whole thing here tied into Bob Litz and what he's trying to do here. I'd like to get your thoughts on, this is kind of off the cuff, but Joel brought up a very good point about combining possibility in June. If you could come up and.
State law allows school districts to set their election anytime between the second Tuesday in April and the third Tuesday in June. And school district elections are nonpartisan elections. And our thought has always been the primaries are very partisan, right down to their split ballots. They don't even get the same ballot. And school districts, being nonpartisan, needs to stay away from the partisan politics.
In that situation, would you have a separate ballot? This one is the nonpartisan school board city ballot that would be, I'm just asking a fundamental question here.
What you do is you have if you're a registered Republican, you get a Republican ballot, which has your Republican candidates, and then the city and school. It's laid out.
Similar to the judges? And
Yes, similar to the judges on the order. If you're a Democrat, you can come in and you vote a Democrat ballot or a choice. If you're registered other certain specifics, you can either have a nonpartisan, we call it, or vote a Democratic ballot because of Democrats. So in a primary, you're going to have 3 times almost the ballot styles that you do in a general, just because you have Republican, Democrat. And that's another issue when you're talking about vote centers, when you have as many ballot styles as Pennington does, you're going to have errors in your precinct workers making sure they get the right ballot style, which was Mrs. Dunn's problem, I believe, to the right person. And not having that person, after they've deposited their ballot, call the media and say, I didn't get the right ballot. And then you can't check. And sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong.
We'd also have to have a school-only ballot for the primary as well, because we have voters that are neither Democrat.
The nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would have. But what's nice when you combine it with the primary is those non-registered Democrats now have a choice. There's 3 or 4 that you're registered, you can choose to vote a Democrat ballot, and I believe the Democrats are doing that, correct me if I'm wrong, any Democrat, to get better turnout.
In the last 2 elections, we have changed the ballot receipt you get from the poll book, and it in very large letters tells the ballot style. And then on the actual ballot, you have a black area that has white large letters that also tells the ballot style. We've tried to do that to make it easier for those election officials to give the right ballot every time.
Oh, sure, you
And
do
of course,
everything.
with everything else,
You're gonna have
there's
human error.
Human error.
Yep, no matter what you do.
Right. And that may happen in a primary too, where we have a Democrat and we accidentally hand them a Republican
Yes.
ballot, and they don't tell us till they voted it.
One,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, one thing to add on to what Bev said about nonpartisan versus partisan elections is in Minnehaha County, we have times when the turnout between Republicans and Democrats is vastly different because of what's on the ballot. I think the largest disparity I remember was possibly the one after Representative Janklow left office. And I think the Republican primary for that seat had about a 50% turnout. The Democrats had virtually nothing on the ballot. They had about a 10% turnout in round numbers. And so the question there is, so if you tack in nonpartisan races, but you're getting such a disparity, you're getting an overwhelming number of Republican voters coming, does that skew your nonpartisan race? So it's just kind of to add on what Bev said about that.
Bev, is that probably the biggest reason why you don't consolidate?
And we like to hold our races when school is out, because, but the last week of school, so that our parents are still in. You know, they haven't left for vacation probably that next week or the Tuesday after graduation. They probably haven't left for vacation yet, and so we can get our parents in to vote. So we typically like to do our elections in May. This year we have a referendum on there that would change our school start date if it passes, that they want to change our school start date. So we needed to have it earlier so we could get our calendar committee back together and get us a calendar that will start after Labor Day. So that is why we held the election this year early. Typically, our elections are the 3rd week in May.
3rd week in May.
Right after graduation, we have that election.
And that's a policy decision made by the governing boards, and
But,
I don't
yeah.
know how far in advance they
We
have to make that.
We have to set our
January.
election date by the first board meeting in January,
Yeah.
which is the 2nd Monday in January. We have to make that decision. Knowing that we had this calendar item on our agenda, we actually set our calendar for the election in October this year, just so it could get started.
Yeah.
Aside from the partisan concerns and how that may or may not skew who gets elected or who doesn't. Is it is it technologically feasible and maybe even superior
We
to
have
holding
combined,
it?
we have combined with the county for different votes. The cement plant was on our,
Yes,
did a-
it was a special statewide election,
Yeah.
and we combined with several school districts and cities.
yeah. And, you know, we always combine with the city every time we can. The city requires their election the second April, the second Tuesday in April, so that's when we have it on the years we combine with the city. We always combine, the school district's terms run 3 years, and they're staggered. So we have two people, one person. So we have an election usually every year unless somebody would not run, and that's only happened once since I've been in.
But our voters have told us that they like only going once. So it could just be a different class, which outweighed the partisan issue that you see and the disproportionate amount of voters. It's pretty even in Pennington.
And from a city perspective, I would piggyback right onto what Bev said. That's exactly our reasons as well. Our date is set by charter, and of course the nonpartisan. And honestly, it's not anything that we really talk about. I mean, we just have our second Tuesday in April and combine with the school, and that's just the way we've done it.
And we've done it that way since I started doing it. 94, when I was doing elections then, I worked with Diane Metley, Jeb Owen,
Yeah,
Lori Hogstead. Whoever's there, I work with them.
yeah.
I recall some of the conversation regarding when we had to change the city government vote from the commission form to the council. There was discussions about should we combine, and the sense that I got from the discussion was the people that were involved in writing the charter wanted to have a separate time on purpose because they felt as though they'd get swamped in a November election and there wouldn't be the attention they felt was due to city government if it was combined. And they were adamant about it.
And I'm wondering how the undervotes happen for the school board election when you have a big presidential or a big primary. Do the undervotes really fall off for the local races?
They do to a certain extent, but the voter turnout is higher, so I would, though I haven't, just off the top and working with it for a number of years, they get more votes, even though maybe the voter drop-off is higher. And I can't say that, yes, it is.
Well, for
I mean,
the
when you're
schools-
talking 4% for your turnout to 40 for ours,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to have a lot of drop-off,
Yeah.
and we don't.
Schools really want our parents to vote, and we do everything we can to get those parents in. And that was one of the reasons we looked at vote centers too, because our parents are young. They don't remember a time when there wasn't a TV remote. They don't remember a time where they had to fill out their income tax on paper and wait 2 months for the check to arrive. They don't remember not having a microwave. So they want technology, and they want you to be able to service me now. I gotta go. And so we're trying. I know the older voters are always gonna come. They want to vote. They know the value of their vote. The younger voters, you have to give them a little convenience to get them in the door. And if we don't cater to our younger voters, we won't be having this kind of discussion at all in 20, 30 years.
Really, the discussion should be if we go to all male. Did you hear that, Kia?
No, I didn't hear that.
From the city's perspective on you said the charter, and is there, and would you explain what the difference, what we would have to go through if the city were to try and amend the charter to?
Well, in order to amend the charter, the citizens, the voters would need to vote on charter amendments, and we generally have those for every election. And there's a charter review commission that meets starting generally, we'll actually have one that will start later this year in the fall for any items that might be on the 2016 election. We take public input. The Charter Revision Commission will vote on those items that should be placed on the ballot. and then they're presented to me for placement on the ballot, and then it's the citizens that will vote on the item, whether they wish to make a change in our charter or not.
Do usually those charter amendments come from what your people have heard from the public, or is it something that this committee, this review committee thinks, oh, this is a problem that we've seen, and
Well,
we need to fix it, or is it a mixture?
it's kind of a mixture.
Okay.
Our form of government changed in 1995, and so over time, there's just been things that, we recently had a change to some financial reporting and things that go on the meetings for the budget, and just realized that this process doesn't work quite right. We just need to make a little change in it. So it's just, practice with using it, experiences that we've had, and then we do have citizen input as well as input from the counselors, present and past. So it's a combination.
And this issue hasn't come up, has it?
No.
Yeah.
Does the auditor's office, Bob, or anybody have any comments to add into this before we go to public comments?
Bob Litz with the Auditor's Office. My thoughts on this are, I would certainly entertain, any notions that these two other public servants would have on that there, and there'd be things to work out, of course, but I think not talking about it is to turn a blind eye to something that could be a solution. And after all, what could go wrong?
Are there any public, anybody else in the room would like to add any comments?
I've just been sitting here listening to all of you experts speak, and I would like to just speak as a regular citizen. I work at Hy-Vee. I'm a plumber. I'm a welder. I'm an at-home mom, or I'm a mom who has to pick up a bunch of kids after school, get the groceries, go vote, and go home. I don't know that much about voting centers or precincts or any of this. I do know who I want to represent me on the school board, and I want to vote for that person. I do know who I want to vote for as mayor, and I want to vote for that person. I know who I want to represent me in the State House. I know who I want to represent me as governor and president. I'm not a sophisticated person about all of this stuff you're talking about. All I want to do is go to one place and vote. And I want it to always be that same place that I vote. Things are complicated in my life, and I want this to be easy. Like I said, I know who I want to vote for, and that's all I really need to know as a citizen. And I want to go to that one place and vote, and not be turned away. The woman over here that was talking about the vote centers, of course there were people there that didn't make any complaints because they didn't go to the vote center. They went to their precinct. And they didn't think to go another step further. They only had a half an hour for lunch or an hour for lunch, and then go research where I should have been. They said, the heck with this, and they went back to work or went and got a hot dog or something. My point is this. For the regular person out there, they don't care about all of this. All they want to do is go vote for the person that they want to vote for an elected position, and they want to go to one place, and that place be the same place all the time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Rebecca.
I'm so used to saying commission, committee. My name is Monty Wadenbach. I'm the IT director here at Minnehaha County and a Lincoln County resident inside of the city of Sioux Falls. So one question that I would have for you, and I guess I'll start off by saying when it comes to e-poll books, I think we're going to have another conversation, so I might have some input there. But as far as vote centers, I think one question that that I want to know is, in this scenario of a county election, would there be a scenario where I might have to go to 2 locations to vote if Minnehaha County had a vote centers and Lincoln County did not? Would there be a scenario where I might have to go to 2 locations to vote?
On the same day, do you mean?
Yes. So would I have a Lincoln County commissioner to vote for and a city of Sioux Falls council member?
This has been one of the questions that,
And it didn't get
Gotcha.
talked about today on Surprise, and again, where I live in Lincoln County, Sioux Falls School District, City of Sioux Falls, would that scenario happen? Because I didn't hear that talked about today, and I just heard Rebecca say she wants to go to one place and vote. I wish it could be that simple, but that question needs to be discussed. The other thing was, if we had vote centers, right, and it was one precinct in Minnehaha County, what would happen in the scenario of a recount?
Monty, I live in Sioux Falls, but I'm in the Harrisburg School District in Lincoln County. What's gonna happen to me?
That's my question.
my question
to you
too.
folks. So, if there was vote centers, we're dealing with a complex scenario where you could have vote centers potentially in one county but not another, but a city and school districts that go across those lines. So I think that needs to be discussed as well.
Can I respond?
Go right ahead,
We have
please.
had, as Bev referred to, we had a special statewide election in which we also combined the Sioux Falls School Districts, I think Baltic City and School District, some others. And we worked it out, so all the voters only went to one place. There were a few occasions, I think they were in Lincoln County, where if there was, I think there was a Harrisburg School District the same day and they didn't combine with us, and so there were 2 precinct boards in the same room. And people may have had to go check into the first spot and get a ballot and vote, and then go on, and then they were told to go to the second table. And so they didn't go to 2 different places, but you're right, you can have the potential for 2 different ballots. So a second step you have to take.
But
That
would a
you're
vote
right,
center
that is.
change
Yes.
that, though? Would the vote center
Well,
across between
the-
2 different counties doing things differently change?
You'd have to look at it very carefully because in that one I seem to recall, the situation was Lincoln County did not combine with like the Sioux Falls School District, and this may be before your time, Marlene, it was 2001 perhaps?
I do remember a time when we had an issue because the people were like in the township and not in the city, in the Harrisburg School District, so some of them went to the school within the city limits thinking that that's where they voted because they lived right outside of the city, but they actually had to go over to Harrisburg to vote for the Harrisburg School District because they could not vote in the city one.
Yeah, so you're right, Monty raises a good
It's-
question that is more complex, I think, because of the size of the city in Lincoln County. It's,
Right.
we can't any longer just dismiss that as a small group of voters because it's grown far, far beyond that to where it's a major
I think any sort of
impact.
concept of vote centers becomes a lot more complex when you're dealing with the number of school districts and the fact that the city of Sioux Falls spans 2 counties. So there's certainly, in my mind, some complexities that come there, but I'm not an expert.
I'm really glad you brought that up, and that's why I asked Lincoln County to be represented in here, because that was the question that my friend had brought up about Norway Center. It's, and that's an extreme example, but I do remember in the city election, people being in the rural area, trying to vote in a city election, or said they got a mayoral election and they were actually in the rural, and they were just there to vote on a school issue or something.
Had to be school, yes.
So there was some confusion on ballots in that situation. So you've brought up the perfect example of this whole dilemma that we have about different types of voting and different ways to vote, and how we could ever combine all of these elections so we wouldn't have so much confusion in the future.
I think just the explanation of in a scenario of a voter recount, how do vote centers affect that recount?
The recount would work the same way because a recount is for a candidate or an issue, and you have to address all the ballots that affect that. It may be different number of polling locations, but it's still the same ballots.
Sure.
So you don't count any more or less or recount any more or less. And the margin to request a recount is still considered on the entire vote count, whether it overlaps different counties, school district lines, or
Creating one
state.
precinct doesn't change that.
Can't change what it will cost and the amount of work of a recount.
Thank you. I'll be back when we talk about the poll books.
Thank you very much. We have.
Can I say
go right
one
ahead.
thing, though? I'm just following up a little more on that thought process. Last year, we had a city election, and how many ballots were there voted? 4,000? 40,000, I mean?
Yeah, about 40,
About 40,000. Now, if we had had precincts and there was a recount in, say, the central district, if we, then we would have only recounted, we would have only handled the precincts in the central district. When you've got a vote center election where people in the central district can vote anywhere, you're gonna have to open all the ballot boxes and go through all 40,000 ballots to sort them out. That perhaps is what you were getting at, but that definitely does add to the volume.
That you
of a
have to look at.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
But you're only recounting the same number of
Yeah,
votes.
you're recounting the same number, but you're looking through, sorting through all those ballots, trying to find the ballots that you're going to recount. So it is more
That's true,
complex.
yep.
And that did happen to us. We had a recount, and the way we keep our absentees is not by precinct, it's en masse. They're just coded by precinct, so we can run them all together and still get votes by precinct. We had to go through and pull out the correct ballots for the recount, so yes.
Yeah, that has happened here too, and it adds some
It adds
hours
time.
of work.
Sue, is that a recount requested by the candidate or issue?
Yes.
Or is that a recount for internal?
No,
you know,
no,
'cause you gotta
that's,
run the ballots through the machine again for some reason?
no, that's an officially requested
Okay.
recount because of a close race.
Yes,
Okay.
which there's a certain margin.
2%, something like that. Going
No.
straight.
Have fun.
Sue has to leave us now, and we're close to wrapping
another
up.
meeting.
But wanted to discuss, if everybody's done with this topic, we'll move on to any old business. And wanted to bring up the fact that we had an answer from ES&S on what happened last Friday with the touchscreen scanners. On the scanners had a calibration issue, and we got an answer back from Alexa that she said last Friday the touchscreen on the 850 we were using got out of calibration, so when we touched the buttons on the screen wasn't reading them correctly. I called our hardware support line while Darlene continued on the other machine, and we recalibrated the screen. After that, the 850 was operating without issue. I've made a note to have the unit's touchscreen looked at when we're up to do the next maintenance. And I also would like to ask if the system could also, if there's a chance before we have our last meeting, at least to be able to find out what the log files say on the two machines that tells us, that confirms what she's just said, just, to add to it. We had the 45 minutes during the election tabulating in November where the machine was totally down, and I was hoping that we would be able to just look at the error log that goes with it. And go ahead, Julie, you've got something to add.
Did you keep it?
I was not here,
I mean, all the things that,
Yeah,
on the bottom printer?
Yeah, that,
I have a whole big stack in back in the.
from last Friday?
Yeah, those are still on the machine right now. I didn't
And
take
then,
those off.
of course, you keep it from the general.
And the error log I'm talking about is
There's
the,
a computer that we can't get, that they have to get, yeah.
it's
Okay.
the error log I'm considering is the machine's error log, that it keeps track of the events on the machine that caused it to crash. If it was a I don't know how their air log works in there, but if we could just find out. This is
If-
just from
if
a
they're the same
mechanical side of
issue.
it. Yeah.
Some of it, Bruce, I think we can find out, in other parts of it, ES and S.
My understanding, ES&S had to pull the particular air log that I'm talking about. And not the ballot air log, but the machine air log. There's two different air logs that are being kept, I'm sure.
Yeah, they have to keep everything.
Yeah.
On the issue of was it the same issue last Friday as it was on election night?
That's what I wanted to find out.
I will address that.
Get those things out of the way, Bob.
Caroline Johnson again from the auditor's office. When I first started testing the machines, after we got them, we had ballots, I started testing them. We did have it lock up the same way. We had the tech people come out and addressed it, but it is the same thing that happened when we first had the machines and I was testing them. So we
All
did.
3 incidents are the same?
No, the one on election night is different, but I did have it lock up like it did last Friday when I was first testing the machines. And
What was the issue on election night, if it was different, if I might ask?
Did the machine totally shut
It
down?
just shut down, from my understanding. I was not down there.
45 minutes.
And then just God came and you prayed a lot and it,
We had somebody
kicked
here
it?
from Sea Change, and she was able to work with the hardware people, I think, on the phone and get it up and running again.
okay. You have maintenance agreement on your 850s?
Yes.
How often do you pay for maintenance?
Well, it's an annual thing, but I
Is
take
it-
it to, especially when we had the 650s, is every time we had an election.
Right.
I just brought them out.
So you have a maintenance before every election?
Yes.
And you got no response from ES&S what that,
They haven't looked into it since then. We haven't had anything since that incident on election.
and they didn't really tell you anything?
Other than they recalibrated.
In,
On election night? They did a recalibrate, they actually did something?
I don't know what they did on election.
Hers was a whole bunch of different restarting different computers and stuff in it.
Mhm.
We didn't have any, she was on the phone working on it the whole time, but we did not find out the actual reason. No, we have not found that out.
We were too busy to talk to her about it. She took off back to.
Well,
St.
that's
Paul
that's
before
what they're there for.
No,
Do
she
you,
didn't have it at that time.
do you normally have site support on election night? No, who can afford that?
When machines have gone down in the past,
That's why you have more than one.
yeah.
Did you lose vote totals?
Anything that wasn't saved, was not, we then had to rerun that.
We had to
Okay.
rerun the precinct.
Yeah. And we keep track where we save and where we don't, and yeah.
We write it down.
this was one of my questions for Mike from ES&S the other day when we were going through all of this. I wanted to find out what was on that machine's event log that says, this is why the machine shut off on us
Do you think we could get that
before the,
next meeting?
I think we could try to contact Mike. Mike is the salesperson who would know that, but the lady that he brought along,
Alexia.
Alexis, might be the ones that would know that.
I think
I think the other lady, the Smith lady, was it Linda Smith?
Linda Smith, she runs a different area, but Alexis Scott Morrison is our district tech. Mike's just a salesperson. That's why I was concerned that they had somebody else represented here.
Yeah, I think you talked to Lex and maybe.
possibly they could just log into the machine and kick out a report for you?
They might have to come up and do that, but people have to set
But
up
we've
time.
got the school board election coming up anyway, and you'll have to have the machine checked out for the school
Yeah,
board
it's up to
election.
when he can get here. I know we set up the time, it could be weeks, just depends on where he's at on running his different times.
Who's your tech? Is it Ryan?
It's Todd.
Ty?
Yeah.
You don't want to call them in special.
Right.
I can tell you that right now. Because what is
Try
it?
to get 'em when they're making the circuit.
When they're making the rounds, I think we should try and, if Alexa can't answer it, and talking with,
She had said last Friday to me that she was gonna talk to Ty when he was up around here to have him stop by and look into it. We'll have to check with her to make sure that that's what she's doing.
yeah. And whoever was here on that night, election night from Sea Change, is not an ES&S employee or tech. And Alexia didn't know what the issue was on election night. So I don't know if I think we should ask her and get a response from her how we can figure out what happened. But their machines, they go down. Just like your computer can crash, as long as you can figure out where you're at on the vote count. And there's multiple ways to do that. If you haven't saved it to the thumb drive, you just start over. That's your only recourse if you can't tell where it's at. But you can print reports once it comes back up. We had the jam, and that was our issue. We didn't pick up ballot counting from where we thought it had stopped counting, and that's why we had to start completely over. We know now. Which every time you have a problem like that with any machine, you find out and you just change your process.
This is why one of the questions I asked in the meeting was, what kind of storage capacity did they have? Did they have just the flash drive, or did they have a hard drive, and how big was the hard drive? And they said they had plenty of capacity to store all the results. So if we were to do early tabulating of the absentees, we'd have space for it. And so I was comfortable with the fact that with your processes of being able to check off that this one went through properly, we didn't lose those ballots during that 45 minutes.
I think there's a backup system to that too, because every one of the ballots that goes through there actually gets a picture
taken
as well. And so I don't know how to access that or compare it to the two, but that's in there too. So I think you've covered doubly.
And that feature is used in other states. It just isn't needed here because we have the physical ballot. That's what we do our recounts off of.
Okay.
But yeah, it's the importance of, if you can tell where your ballot count is on the machine if something goes wrong. And you can always print reports to find out. And if it loses everything, you always know what ballots have been counted on that scanner, and you simply have to start over. The first scanner I used was a 315 AIS, and in the middle of the scanning process, of course, we had a very small room, and we were letting everybody in there, and our Democrat resolution team guy tripped on the electrical cord, shut the scanner off, and we had to start completely over with that scanner. So, it's human error. It can happen, and you just look at it and laugh, and thank God it wasn't my own party. And I wasn't on the ballot. So, you're going to have those kind of stories no matter what. And what you do is you learn as the person running the election and running the machines, is that you just develop a new process to work it through. Our process is completely different now. Well, not completely, but is different now than it was with the old scanners because we had 2 new issues. And we definitely know now what we're going to do if a scanner shuts down. We thought we had the ballot stamp thing worked out, but green is the new red.
Does anybody else have any old business they'd like to talk before we move?
I was wondering about the possibility of submitting written questions to you as the chair. I think sometimes, like with ESS last week, they weren't really responsive when your answer starts out, I'm really not the right person to ask about this, but if we could submit written questions through you to go to them in some of these cases.
I would really appreciate that. To be able to, and with Kia being out in Pier, are you still there, Kia?
I am.
If you would like to be able to submit the written questions, we'd really appreciate it from everybody here, and we actually want the public to if they're watching on YouTube or if they have any questions, to be sure and get back with us on anything. That's more clarification, the better for all of this process.
But
Go ahead.
Bob, you will contact ES&S to get that.
I will make arrangements to do that.
Thank
I'm not sure what I'm going to do here.
Yeah, well, or somebody, but
Yes,
so we
yes.
could get a,
Yes, for both events.
yes, thank you.
That'd be great. I'd like to move on to just any new business. And one of the things that we really need to do is set what we're going to talk about for our next meeting in 2 weeks. On February 20th, we're having a meeting, and it will be discussing the data and the e-polling books and going into that in depth. But we would like to set an agenda for what we're going to be discussing in 2 weeks. And yes, Robert.
I would just point out that e-poll books on the 20th, but then you also had the note from Kia that the individual from Total Vote is available on that day.
And that, I think that ties in, the two tie together
Just
with
That's-
Total Vote, e-poll books, and the benefits and that we can work off of with it.
they complement each other. I just
Very
wanted
much
to
so.
make clear there were both issues would be.
And I'll be out of the office, so I'll call in for that February 20th meeting.
This, I've been just throwing some discussions in here for the next time. It's based on things that, and we can talk about this over the next couple days, what our agenda is actually going to be. But the ballot style with the, considering the precincts, 71 versus 8, you know, I know when I stopped in and saw Bob prior to the June primary, and he was working through all of the different ballot styles that were necessary with all the, even down to the point of the precinct committee people for the Republican parties and all the different styles that the office had to work through, and it's actually become an interesting side to this to me when you were talking, Julie, about the way your county works with the different types of ballots and how that can be confusing. And when Monty was here just a few moments ago and what we're going to be, I saw another issue right in that one with going back to the 3 different types of elections that are involved with the 2 different counties, the city, school boards, all this stuff coming in. And maybe we could be kind of laying that out so we can have a better idea of it. We touched on a discussion here, and after we've had a chance to think about it, the working with the school and the city to combine the elections. We've really gotten into that in some detail here that I never even gave it any thought with the charters and the way the boards have to vote, if that wants to be explored any further. We have also discussed informally, I think, the discussion of maybe an additional tabulator for the county and what that would take. Go ahead, Bob.
You know, Bruce, I remember having this conversation out in Pier last year about combining all the elections and stuff, and the idea that different entities had different budgets and swearing in times too was there. And so if you elected somebody, let's say we elected them all in the primary, that person may have to wait until that budget cycle came in or was finished, or until the swearing in of that time, you know. So just because you had the election doesn't mean that person's automatically going to be able to assume that office. And I don't remember all the details, but that was part of the conversation we had, you know, because there was a bill out there last year where they wanted to have all the elections on the first Tuesday in November. And I was sitting in a chair out there at the State Affairs Committee, I think, and it came forward, and I was totally unaware of it, and I think I was either, okay.
I wasn't there on that one.
I testified against it, and the only thing that saved it from moving out of committee was there was another auditor on there. But I was trying to imagine what that ballot would look like. The entire statewide ballot, the school, the municipal, the cities, everybody having the same election day.
It looks just like what ours does. Only ours is in the primary. When we combined with the cities and schools that we do combine, it did not change their swear-in dates.
Is that right?
No. And they moved it to the June primary election. There are states that have set election days, and that's the only days any election can be held, and they're all run by the chief election officer, I would say probably of the county. And I don't know if they're overlapping cities or what they do with overlapping school districts, who administers that part of it, but.
I remember you and I had that conversation, and the thing that we did agree on was the down ticket items, the down ticket candidates are probably gonna be getting ignored, but
Yeah.
maybe they would anyway.
These are just some ideas that maybe we'll put into an email and get everybody discussing them. Another one was, well, I think I just mentioned possibility of what it would take to get an additional tabulator, so that we have.
At $125,000.
Well, you know, it's going to be one of the proposals if we so vote.
Bruce, I would tell you that, you know, we got done with counting the ballots about 9:30 in the morning, and at 10 o'clock, that was a topic of conversation.
Well, we had a good discussion about it last week's meeting, and I think maybe if we could look into what it would take to do that other than just money. You know, if it's political will or whatever it will be. We did discuss, and this was a note from earlier, the testing of the equipment prior to the election and how that's done. And to me, that's kind of important. And this is the first time I've heard about the ERM and how the ERM reporting is done. And I would really, to me, that's the geek that I am on that kind of stuff. That's fascinating to me. So I wouldn't mind a little presentation on it too, just so that I can see. I've been in the back room when the IT has been in there sending the information up to Pier, but I didn't know how all the rest of it tied together and how it also changed when we went from the 650s to the 850s, and you know, it's just part of that process that kind of completes it for me. And then Bev was talking about the ballot style printouts, and I made a note to myself, and I just wanted to kind of follow up with actually back to that original thing. I think with ballot styles in the precincts versus voting centers, and so I have a better clarity on it than.
Do you see this committee making in our report a recommendation specifically with Minnehaha County that they consider, if it would pass, combining their elections? Do you see something like that coming out in our recommendations? Or look at it at least that the county needs to change to vote centers, or that the city and the schools need to combine? Do you see that coming out as part of the discussion or recommendation? Or are you looking for that?
Yeah, that's actually part of what I was thinking about in this meeting was the easing of the confusion that goes
For the
on.
voter.
And what can we do to make the process smoother for the voter? And what Rebecca was talking about and the confusion, Monty was talking about the confusion. You know, there is a lot of confusion. We have so many different governmental bureaucracies, voting systems in this area, and we always know we have high information voters and we have low information voters, and we just need to simplify the system so everybody can feel more comfortable that when they go to vote, they always know they can go vote somewhere. And what can we do to simplify the system or help guide the system along and find better ways to report it? I'm kind of passionate about that side of things. So.
And then we just need to make sure that we say these are recommendations, because each of the entities can choose to operate as they wish.
Exactly.
But these would be recommendations.
We have no power here to
Authority.
tell anybody to do anything,
Right.
but we've looked at it and we would like them to be able to.
Well, this committee was set up at the request of Minnehaha County Commissioners and Bob, I don't know. So I would say our recommendations would be geared toward them. And so the wording would be, you should review with other boards whether you should combine elections and or make the decision whether you're going to do vote centers or all by precincts. I mean, to that, I think it
Direct
takes
it toward the county,
toward the county and what they need to do, which is basically the same thing, but it starts the conversation. And then it allows those boards to make those decisions, which is where it should be on precincts or vote centers.
And I agree with that. That's, we were asked by the county commissioners and Secretary of State and Bob Litz, the auditor, to consider this for Minnehaha County, but I've asked, the other representatives of the voting areas to come to this meeting specifically so we could talk about this in an open way and get everybody to start considering, what these problems are that we have to deal with. So, does anybody have anything else they'd like to add?
I would just be looking for a little clarification that I'm going to be looking for ideas and somewhat of a consensus, at least for this next meeting, in putting that together, because I hear a number of ideas of reviewing some topics, some that you've already talked about. I guess from the committee, I'll be looking, as I'm putting that agenda together, looking for some consensus of what you want to focus on, if that sounds
I've
appropriate.
kind of made a list
Okay.
off of what you said,
All
Bruce.
right.
We kind of want to bring everybody up to speed, if you will, on when we talk ballot styles, why they're out there, and how that affects everybody. We want to see if I don't know if this next meeting or at the end when we start making the recommendations, which Sue and I have made some comments already, how we address the recommendation, if we have one, on combining city-school elections, and whether we recommend that with this county, and whether we would recommend one or the other vote centers or all by precincts to relieve the voter confusion, the purchase, and possibly whether Bob has HAVA money for another scanner and or e-poll books, because I believe e-poll books are coming up later.
On the 20th.
And he wants a review of kind of how everything goes into ERM and maybe some of the reports that come out of those. And you can copy what reports there are from ERM, and we can explain that process, and then how it gets into the election night reporting system and what changes we want for that. Is that?
That says it much better than I said.
So then the 20th of next month will be when we have B-Pro and we talk about the database.
Yes. And I'd like that meeting to tie into how that works with the e-poll books. So we'd have that kind of a discussion on those two areas.
Well, there's not much difference between the e-poll book and a paper poll book. The data that goes in there.
It's a total vote, and it's going back to total vote, as I understand it's called.
Correct, but my part of the e-poll books is whether we were going to make a recommendation that e-poll books be purchased in the same type of discussion as with the scanner, because that all talks about money, and the money comes from the board or your HAVA funds. And I know at the meeting we had yesterday, we were given updated HAVA balances, as well as a new opinion from the Secretary of State's office on use of HAVA purchased equipment.
I know we've got some changes.
And we should probably discuss that because it's going to affect the city and the schools.
I would say this, the e-poll,
Yes, I think we should put that on. Is that new decision?
the e-poll book is evolving rapidly. I remember the first election that we had with the school, we used an ES and S poll book, and we had some issues with it, and we went to the Hart poll book, which was much better. And then last Monday a week ago, I had a company called Robus give me an internet overview of their poll book, and I was amazed at some of the changes and some of the abilities that their poll book has. And so I think it's kind of like the cell phone. The technology is advancing so rapidly on these, and the improvements are so rapidly happening on these that there's a lot of advantages to looking at a bunch of different systems.
Yeah, I don't see us making a recommendation for a specific system. And I know B-Pro is working on one. We'll be testing for the March, and we're working closely with them on that. Kia, are you still there?
I am.
When we talk about Flowing ERM information into election night reporting, is that B-Pro for programming, or is that done at the state IT people? Do you know?
I don't think our state IT department is involved in that currently.
Okay.
So it's probably, the ERM is probably more with the B-Pro side to merge into our total vote system.
Okay, then I would suggest that we change that discussion on the ERM and how it flows into election night reporting to the same day that the Brandon Campia is here from B-Pro, which is February 20th. Yeah. And I won't be here, so you guys will have to hand that one.
Anything to do with data would be great to tie together to see how all the systems work together. Anybody else have any thoughts? Does that answer your preliminary question, Robert?
I believe so, yes.
All right. Well, with not seeing any more new business, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Here, seconds.
Actually, you can just do that, then we don't have to do a roll call, Bruce.
We're adjourned.